Welcome in to Locked On Knicks. Alex Wolf and Gavin Shaw here, joined again by our good buddy Prez. If you haven't checked it out already, check out yesterday's episode where we talked about RJ Barrett's skills that he should look to develop. But today we're talking about other skills the guys on the Knicks should be looking to develop. And on today's show, we're talking Jalen Brunson's three-point volume, Deuce McBride's three-point percentage, and Julius Randle's defensive acumen, all coming up right now on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome in to Locked On Knicks, and we want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, whether you're checking us out on your favorite podcast platform or taking in the sights and sounds on YouTube. We appreciate you making us a part of your daily routine. Make sure you hit that notification bell or the auto download function so you can be an every day or and never miss an episode. And if seeing us every day isn't enough, you can check us out on Subtext as well, which is a platform where you can write from your phone, talk with Gavin and I. Check that out. Link is in the description, either on your favorite podcast platform or on YouTube. I'm Alex Wolf. I'm editor-in-chief at Knicks site, The Strickland, which you can find at thestrick.land. And he's Gavin Shaw, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. And as we said, we're joined by our buddy Prez again. If you didn't check out yesterday's episode, maybe go back, check that out, and come back here. Or listen to this one. They're not like sequential, so whatever, listen to whichever one you want. But we did do an episode yesterday. We have another one coming tomorrow where we're continuing to talk about skills. But Prez is super great for this. He's the co-host of the Pod Strickland podcast on Fridays, and he also is just very skill obsessed. So he's sort of the perfect guy to do this pod with. So we'll get right into it now, talking Jalen Brunson, Deuce McBride, and Julius Randle today. To start the second part, or the spiritual second part of this episode, Gavin, I think your Jalen Brunson thing here is a good point to jump off on after RJ, someone who's been a little underwhelming to this point, and RJ jumping right to the person who was obviously overwhelmingly awesome last year, and hopefully just has room to continue going up in Jalen Brunson.
Yeah, so I'll talk quickly and then almost immediately throw this to Prez, because Prez, I don't know if you remember, but you tweeted about this like a month ago, and that's when I remember for a different episode, first really looked into the numbers on it and was like, oh yeah, that's it's just crazy how much meat there is on the bone for a guy who, you look at his impact stats, and in the playoffs he played like a top 5 player in the regular season, he played like a top 25 to 30 player in the NBA, and he did it all with arguably the most valuable modern commodity for a guard, self-created three-point shooting, wasn't really a huge part of his game. He took just 4.7 threes per game while shooting just under 42%. So just a quarter of his shot diet was from three for a point guard that was only 17th percentile in the NBA. He did up it 6% in the playoffs, and of course the percentage is tanked in the playoffs. He shot 9% worse in the playoffs, but I just want to look at the shot total, just 5 threes per game. Luka took 8 last year. Dame took 11. Tatum took 9. Mitchell took 9. Kyrie took 9. Jalen Brown took 7. Larry Markkinen took 8. Julius Randle took 8 last year. He is an exceptionally good shooter. It was kind of the first time in his career who's forced to lean into self-created pull-up shooting on any kind of volume. He's playing off of Luka. He got a heavy diet of catch and shoot threes, which he was always excellent on. In Dallas, he was low volume, low efficiency on pull-ups, and now he was still pretty low volume, but he was super high efficiency. And I think just tinkering with that a little bit, maybe not even doubling it, but getting up to 8 threes per game, there's a world where he's a pretty efficient 28-point scorer this year. And of course, you don't want to take away from his mid-range volume because he's as good there as anywhere else on the floor, but he's just so good from three. It doesn't matter how good he is from mid-range. Those are never going to be equally good shots. But Prez, I'm curious your take on all that.
Yeah, I mean, he took a lot more pull-up threes in particular in the playoffs. And if he starts doing that, we know he can shoot. So that's how, if he starts taking a bunch of pull-up threes, that's when you start talking about, can this guy average 30 points a game, right? Can he start getting close to that? He probably won't average 30 a game, but after January, he averaged 28 points a game, and he can still take a little bit more pull-up threes, and he's just such a ridiculously good mid-range scorer that normal math kind of goes out the window for him. But yeah, he has another gear to reach there, and then he also has another gear to reach to what I was talking about earlier in the RJ Barrett portion of the show is if we get him some damn spot up attempts, he takes. I never really looked at the numbers until last week, but he gets about one spot up three per game. Donovan Mitchell gets three. Like it, and obviously it's a little different because Donovan Mitchell is not the point guard on his team, even though he's the main scorer. He has Darius Garland there, and so if he takes a little bit more pull up threes, and the Knicks can get him some easy spot up threes, then I don't know, man. He can score quite a lot of points.
Would you lean into more lineups with him and IQ on the floor together, or is that more, which is something I'm going to touch on later, like counting on Grimes or RJ to get him more of those shots?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason Tibbs, stubborn as he can be, for people have kind of forgot because of just how the playoffs ended, but like for the entire second half of the season, Tibbs was closing games with IQ and Brunson, which is as it should be, like until Grimes makes another leap and makes that decision a lot harder for Tibbs. Like you can obviously play Grimes you can play Grimes at the three, so it's not like you can't play Grimes. That would just mean you're not playing RJ or Hart, presumably. But like IQ is the third best player or fourth, depending on how you rank Mitchell Robinson on the team, and he's also happy to pass, like you're alluding to. So like the more we can get Brunson on the floor with guys willing to pass, whether like we know Randle will pass to him, but if we can get just guys willing to pass to him, whether that's Quentin Grimes doesn't really get a chance to pass to him because that he just doesn't get the ball anywhere other than the short highway from the corner to the rim that he goes 100 miles an hour on, like it's the Autobahn. But if Quentin Grimes starts getting more usage elsewhere, then Grimes is a pretty good passer too, right? So like there's lots of ways to do it, but definitely playing with Quickly is one of them.
Yeah, I love the idea of having the ball in Quickly's hands more and getting it to Brunson for those spot up attempts. Like, and I think that's the easiest low hanging fruit way to get Brunson to get his 3-point attempts up. And why would you not want to? Like the guy shoots 40% from three. Like you want to get the ball in his hands as many times as possible for those. And like that's like I feel like I've brought this up 8 million times, but this is like the joy of having two guys in Brunson and Quickly that came up in similar development environments as far as what their role was. Brunson, because of playing off Luka for the first 4 years of his career, really knows how to like work off the ball and find his spots that way. Like he's not like Russell Westbrook or something where like he's this dominant point guard but like the second you take the ball out of his hands, he's like, whoa, I guess I'll just go over here and stand and do nothing and have no utility. And like, don't bother guarding me because I can't do anything and I don't know what to do in like a spot up attempt or whatever. He like is very, very good at that. And that would be such a great way to not only get guys like Quickly or Grimes, or I mean, this even falls into RJ too. And this would be an easy way to say to RJ, like, hey, this is a great way for you to keep your head up. Like, here's the very easy to understand numbers on why Jalen Brunson should be taking more 3-pointers. Like, you're really good at getting inside. Like, get your assists up, bro. Like, shoot a pass out his way. Like, he's a good 3-point shooter, and you can use that gravity that you create to kick out to him, which will then eventually get you more room to finish inside. I think all these guys, you could make the case of like, hey, get Brunson involved that way. And that saves Brunson the effort of having to come down there and like every time he wants a three, make it fully self-created, which it felt like, especially during the playoffs, that was the case. And I mean, you kind of had to at a certain point. He was like the only guy on the team that could consistently create offense and consistently make shots for most of the playoffs, especially in that Heat series when he was like the only one that could really get what he wanted. But I think that's just such an important thing for him is to and it's not even for him necessarily, it's more on the team, but like finding ways to use him off ball a little more to take a little bit of that onus off so that then when you reach the late stages of the game, he's at his best self, because that's what you obviously want when you have your primary 1A scorer out there, is that he's going to be in the best position possible at the end of the game to have as much juice left as possible to go out there and like get you the bucket that you really need to win the game in the end. So yeah, I think I'm with you guys. I think that increasing the volume and most likely through spot up attempts would be really, really valuable for him. All right, we'll be right back in with Prez, continuing to talk about skills to develop for Knicks players. I bring up Deuce McBride's three-point shooting and why it could make him an NBA rotation player. And then we talk about one of Prez's big things, which is Julius Randle's defense. And kind of always a big thing for the Knicks, but you know, it's a lot to talk about. But first, I got to remind you all, today's show is brought to you by Ibotta, and it's officially summer, and that means new clothes. If you haven't gotten shorts already, I don't know what's wrong with you, dude. Like, get some shorts. It's pretty hot outside. But your closet shouldn't be the only thing growing when you make those purchases. Now you can also watch your cash back grow with each purchase with Ibotta. Ibotta gives you cash back on hundreds of grocery items, from produce to personal care to pantry goods, so you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Either link your loyalty account or upload your receipt after you shop, and you can get your cash back. It really is that easy. The average Ibotta user earns $120 per year. That could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip. Or you could use your cash back to buy that flight you've been eyeing, that game you've been dying to go to, or the fancy dinner you've been craving. Other apps give you points that don't amount to much, but with Ibotta, you get real cash back that you can cash out to your bank account, PayPal, or gift cards. You can earn cash back on hundreds of online brands and retailers too when you start with Ibotta, including Lowe's, Macy's, Sephora, Best Buy, and more. So right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKED when you register. Just go to the App Store or Google Play Store and download the free Ibotta app and use code LOCKED. That's IBOTTA in the Google Play or App Store, and use code LOCKED. But I guess if we're talking about 3-point shooting, I'll move into my next thing that I think is important for the Knicks here. And maybe this is a little on the fringes at this point, because it's kind of tough to see how this guy is even going to see the floor at this particular moment in time, given how things went last year and the fact that the Knicks brought another guard in that, you know, they clearly believe in, and Dante DiVincenzo. But I think Deuce's 3-point shooting is really important. And this is twofold. One, I think that eventually, whether it's before the season or whether it's during the season, the Knicks are going to make a trade that's going to free up enough playing time that Deuce will become relevant in the rotation again, and is going to need to play minutes again. But then the other thing is that it is like literally the only thing I think holding him back from becoming, like, I don't know if quite like Marcus Smart necessarily, but like something in that mold of player where he's clearly good enough at handling the ball. If the 3-point shot can just come around to like 35, 36%, like plus the amount that he affects things on defense, I think that he's going to be an NBA rotation player, period. Like he won't have to just be on the fringe anymore. And it won't have to be like, well, Deuce is amazing at defense, but he only shoots like in the 20s or low 30s and from three. And that's just going to prevent him from staying on the floor. If he can get his percentages up to like 35, 36% and, you know, prove that he could do that potentially or on like 2.5 to 3-point attempts per game, I think we're looking at a guy that could realistically like crack a rotation again. Maybe this is a Knicks or elsewhere thing, but I think he would end up sticking with the Knicks because they would realize like what an asset having someone that plays defense like that and everything is, and would have the inside scoop on if he did make 3-point shooting leaps or whatever. I think he would probably end up staying in some form of trade that would end up netting the Knicks a star or whatever. And once those minutes open up, I think if he could just start hitting his threes, like there's a really, really good player there. Like the impact stats, the on-off stats are just absolutely insane for him.
Yeah. There was a point last year, like when the Knicks went on that winning streak, like post the rotation change, like he was again in limited minutes, and you could talk about the matchup types he was getting, but like statistically, he was the most impactful defender in the NBA. Like, he had the best defensive rating in all of basketball. Again, some noise with like the lineups and the amount of minutes he was playing. But I'm with you, and I think it's an exceptionally good point that the Knicks are building just so much insurance into this roster. Like Dante DiVincenzo's like contract and obviously part of it is that they're going to go small and they're going to find minutes for him there. But I don't think it's necessarily of someone like of the role that he's currently going to be playing. It's projecting forward. Like Quickly's going to be gone. RJ's going to be gone. Grimes is going to be gone. One of those guys, two of those guys, three of those guys are going to get traded. And I think Deuce is an interesting example of that insurance. Prez, I'd be curious, like your take on what his upside is as a shooter, because like we all know he had those monster G League numbers as a rookie. Like I think I maybe like just like commit, like I'll be like on my deathbed and I'll still be reciting them because like we've just said them on the podcast so many times now. But he was like a really, really dynamic shooter at that level. And then like similar to what you were saying about or maybe it was Alex who was saying about RJ, like where it was a little bit of a mental thing. Like you could almost see like the gears turning every time he shot. It was like, all right, I don't want to get benched. I like playing. I want to stay on the court. But where do you think he like potentially tops out as a shooter? Like again, whether that's New York or elsewhere, because like if I'm looking for a mold for him, I look at someone like Javon Carter, who preceded him at West Virginia and last season got up to a 42% 3-point shooter and went kind of like Deuce was now, and like he was early in his career, like a fringe rotation guy to a clear-cut, impactful player on a team with title aspirations.
Yeah, so I mean, I think it's definitely not ability with him, it's confidence. There's times where we're just like, shoot a deuce, and he's a little tentative. He got a little better accuracy-wise as the year went on. Damn, I just had the numbers up. What the hell did I do with them? But he went from like awful to like just like by month his 3-point percentage was 10, 26.
Oh,
that was
really hits.
to be fair, that was like November where he played 7 minutes per game or whatever. So basically he didn't play.
Sure.
10, 26, 30. And then that 30 in January, then 50 in February, 42 in March. April was only a couple of games, so it was like 20, but small sample. So I mean, gun to my head, I'm still betting on him putting up competent numbers immediately. I think even with the hesitancy to shoot, like the numbers shouldn't be as bad as they were. There's probably some noise there if I had to guess, just bad luck, to be honest. So I don't know. We'll see. He's totally. I'm with y'all. If he does that, then he's gonna be a rotation player. Like there's worse shooting. There's like guys like Pat Beverly and Javon Carter getting deals around the league, and then Deuce will be fine. You know, even if he's never going to play like 30 minutes a night or something.
Yeah, I think so too. That's my ultimate takeaway on Deuce is like, that's like the final piece. And I mean, obviously there are other things that could happen out of nowhere that would make him more significant than that, in the league and make him potentially a higher money player or whatever. But I think he could play until he's like 35 if he just like in the NBA and keep being relatively in demand, like a Patrick Beverly type guy. If he just figures out the 3-point shot and the consistency. And like you said, Prez, I'm not too worried about it either. I think that he's sort of like pretty much every young player on the Knicks since Tibbs took over. I think he kind of just deals with that looking over his shoulder syndrome of like, like, oh, if I miss these 2 threes, like I might get pulled, and then that gets in your head, and then you
can we say topinitis or
topinitis? Yeah,
not current anymore. Yeah,
it doesn't really work with you can't say that it's like IQ anymore, because obviously IQ kind of like cracked the code, I guess, and finally got Tibbs's confidence. But I feel like there's similarities between like how Deuce could find a role and how IQ did, which was essentially just like finding the way to overcome that mental block and like find that consistency shooting the ball and whatever, enough that then Tibbs finally says like, oh, all right, well, I can see how good you're playing defense and everything, so I guess I just kind of have to find a role for you at this point. But it is going to be difficult, short of a trade or something, for that to happen for him with the Knicks this year, just because of the fact that there's like 5 guys ahead of him in the rotation at this particular moment. But I do think, like I said, Knicks or elsewhere, I think that if he finds that 3-point stroke, and if the Knicks make some sort of deal and bring in a new player, and that either sends Deuce to somewhere new that's rebuilding or keeps him on the Knicks where they suddenly, need some of their guys that weren't in the rotation to step into the rotation, I think that he could really find a role for himself. But Prez, as far as another player and another skill, there's a recognizable name here and a skill that I think a lot of people hope that he finds consistency with. So do you have a little something about Julius Randle?
Yeah, I picked Julius defense as the thing that needs to improve. Obviously, he had an awesome year. I think particularly once the Knicks started really killing other teams after the Grimes insertion to the starting lineup, and then even more so once we got Hart. I think it went under the radar because we were winning a lot, but I think his defensive success and effort got worse. I thought he was comfortable just kind of chilling a lot of the time on the perimeter. Sometimes he'd be a little more aggressive if we switched, and he'd be on someone who's like worthy of his attention or whatever, like another all-star or something. But for the most part, I think that's just, people, we talk about like ways guys can improve, and obviously Julius has continued to improve in extraordinary ways on offense for a long time now. He's been about 10 different players in his NBA career, which is crazy. But on defense, like fours in the NBA, just larger wings like him or mobile bigs like him, however you want to categorize him, they just have such a unique ability to do lots of things on defense, right? Because these are the players who are big enough to deter at the rim and impose smaller players physically. You can guard smaller players even if you're not as quick because you're much longer and taller, so you have more room for error. Even if you don't want to, these guys who are 6'8", 6'9" on like quick twitch point guards all the time, like they can do that. And Randle doesn't really give you any of those benefits on defense. And what I mean by that is, like, even though he's a power forward, he doesn't really give you any extra rim protection. Part of that is effort, right? Like, he's not the kind of guy to like just sprint and fly over for a weak side block. Part of that is athleticism, in that like he can jump really high, but he's not particularly athletic jumping while moving like backwards or sideways. And he's also like 250 pounds, which is heavy, which, that's fine. I'm not telling Julius to lose weight. Please stay jacked. But, and then, you see it on his closeouts. His closeouts are generally pretty bad. They're not very aggressive on screen. Like you see it all over the place. Like he doesn't really get steals or deflections. He doesn't really blow up pick and rolls. So he's just kind of, last year he was just kind of out there, and I feel like we didn't really talk about it quite as much because, like you alluded to earlier, Gavin, he wasn't the worst or even second worst defender in the starting lineup. But there's a reason why we ended the year like, I forget what it was, like 19th or something in defensive rating. It's because we had 2 or 3, depending on how you rank them, pretty bad defenders out there at any given time. And if 6 or 7 players are getting the majority of your minutes and 3 of them are just kind of stinking up the joint on defense, then you're just not going to be a good defensive team. So the reason why I picked that over, say, RJ's defense is, like, I feel like the front office is rightfully still operating as if until some incredible opportunity comes, Julius is a big part of this team's plans, right? Like he's an all NBA player. He's hit that upside on offense. Like you don't dismiss that super easily. I don't, at least. I know a lot of people want him gone because of the playoff stinkers, which I get totally. But for me, I'm like, if he's giving you all NBA upside on offense, you can't, like, the possibility of getting that in the playoffs is why I'm still on board with this experiment. And in the meantime, let's just give a little effort on defense, and then you could really be like if he just took some more, and what my optimistic situation is, maybe Brunson emerging as the guy, and then RJ Barrett going from like a shit show to all right, means Julius has to work a little less hard on offense, and then maybe he can help lock in on defense. That would be my hope. It might be naive, but that's my hope.
Yeah, I think it's funny because we coming out of the 21-22 season, like at least I and like President, because I know you view things through a developmental lens, like saw it as like a missed opportunity. And that down the stretch of the season, like we had those final 5 games where IQ and OB went off, but like throughout the year, like there was like a lack of experimentation. Like we never got OB and Julius together, like on and on and on. And then coming out of last season, like it felt like the Knicks kind of got all the meat off the bone, except for Julius's injury, and you could also argue IQ's injury, where we just didn't get to see those guys like fully healthy or IQ really at all against the Heat. And like all summer, I've kind of been lamenting that from an offensive perspective because like you, like I was like, even for someone who's been like a quote unquote Julius hater at times, like was kind of weirdly optimistic about how he was going to do in the playoffs. And I thought like the level of athleticism he showed during the regular season, how much he was dunking the ball, the 3-point volume, even if the efficiency like went down a bit, I thought there would be some part of that translated to the playoffs much better than it did years ago against the Hawks. And for no other reason than he was playing off Jalen Brunson versus him being the clear-cut number 1 guy. And obviously the ankle injury negated that. But to your point, like the other big loss was we didn't get to see him defensively. And maybe it was partially opponent based. Like Tibbs deserves a lot of credit for scheming really well. Like Grimes and Mitch deserve all the credit in the world for having heroic performances at times. But the Knicks defense was almost inexplicably good when you consider that Brunson's a sieve. RJ played better, but the numbers show that he wasn't very good. And Julius was playing on one ankle. Like, I wonder what it could look like a year from now. And if the Knicks are betting on like, and clearly they are on like mostly just running it back and getting further in the playoffs, part of it is that like, one, you get Julius offensively, but I think two, and like maybe the underrated part is that like what could he unlock in the playoffs? And we've seen it with like, again, guys in a different category than him, but like LeBron, Embiid, and like most stars who like really turn it up defensively in the playoffs. And Julius, like, physically, like there are some real limitations there, as you noted, but as a switch defender, and like Grant, like who knows like how much Tibbs does that in the playoffs, but like he's had great moments. Like I'll always remember him like in some of those Dallas games, like containing Luka really, really well. I know Alex, you always reference that quite a bit. And I wanted to see that like in like him get a big possession on Jimmy Butler and get a stop. Like I think he's capable of doing things like that. And we saw, I think it was against the Cavs where we had the chase down block. Like, I think he was willing to put that in, and he had such a desire to put that postseason from 2 years ago behind him. He just didn't get an opportunity. So this year we might see that. And I think there's some meat on the bone, whether like in the regular season, like those moments of pure apathy completely go away. Like I kind of think that's part and parcel to who he is as a player. But I think in the biggest games, there is room for a higher ceiling there, and it could kind of change the Knicks trajectory.
Yeah. And I think, if you're looking at like low hanging fruit for him potentially, if you look on NBA stats, they let you see when a player guards opposing players shooting various scenarios, of on the floor. So like 3-pointers, 2-pointers, less than 6 feet, less than 10 feet, etc. And I think the biggest place where Julius can improve is the perimeter. Like if you look on here, and this is to your point, Prez, like less than 6 feet, less than 10 feet, players shoot about 2% better than they normally would against Randle. Whereas on 2-pointers in general and 3-pointers, which, that would include like long twos and stuff in that 2-pointers number, they only shoot 1.3% better and 1.5% better, according to NBA stats. And so like what that tells me is like, if he just works a little, like he quite frankly, just is not built to be a rim protecting dude. Like, to your point, he's stocky in the best way possible. You know, like he's very like yoked and strong, which helps him a ton in various aspects of his game, but doesn't necessarily help him as far as making up for the fact that he's 6'9" in a 7-foot tall man's world, you know, in the inside. And he's also not like, doesn't have like a crazy huge wingspan to kind of make up for that and give him the length that he necessarily needs to like offer a little bit of rim protection there. Plus, just in general, it's just never really shown the aptitude for that. But like Gavin, you referenced exactly what I was going to reference, which is like, this is a guy that like has gone one-on-one against some of the best players in the league from time to time and shown that he could stop them on the perimeter, that he could stop them from shooting 3-pointers and getting their spots that way, that he can, you know, kind of like contain guys on the perimeter. And I think that's the easiest spot for him to improve, is to work on sticking to his man better, whether it's on or off ball. And I think that the off ball thing is the real thing that he really just needs to work on. He needs to commit, especially we see this during the regular season. He loses guys a lot. Like he just kind of ball watches a bit too much, stops paying attention to where his man was. Obviously, this was at its.
I was gonna say, did it a ton in the playoffs too, like
Yes.
especially against the Heat. Yeah,
Did it in the playoffs. It was at its absolute worst last year, in 21-22. That was, I mean, every game was just full of him essentially just standing around watching what the ball was doing and not paying any attention to the guy that he was supposed to be guarding. So like, if he could just work on that, and maybe some of this comes with, you know, to your point, Prez, like a little, or like you sort of reference this, like, and it's sort of like what I said with RJ too, like a little bit of humility in seeing like, okay, I don't necessarily need to exert all of my effort on being like the alpha and the omega on offense anymore, because Brunson can kind of do that now. And we can also have sort of a spread out approach here. Like we have a lot of very talented guys that can handle the ball and create offense and stuff like that. So maybe using a little bit more of that effort, like to keep himself engaged on defense and find mental victories there, I think would be good for him, because Julius is clearly a feel player and clearly a guy that like each little success throughout a game leads to the overall narrative of what that game is going to be for him. I feel like if he starts off well and he gets those few little wins early, it usually translates to a good game overall for him. But if he starts off poorly, and usually this happens on the offensive end, and he starts getting frustrated, then that can lead to a poor game overall, because it just sends him on a downward trajectory. And I think that just gives him all those little opportunities to get those small wins throughout a game. If he just sticks with his man, gets defensive stops, and can sort of see the benefit of that, like both to himself and to the team, I think that would be huge, because clearly he has the ability. Like I think he actually has very good lateral speed and quickness, and the ability to like stay in front of a guy. So I'm with you guys. I think that would be a huge skill for him to hone in on. And just, I mean, it's not even that he has to get better at it, he just needs to embrace it more, I think.
And to your point on the stats, B-Ball Index has some cool defensive stats that basically isolate field goal percentage allowed in specific situations, rather than just like more specific situations than like 6 feet away or 5 feet away or whatever, to sort of cut down on noise. And there include like when defending a ball screen, when chasing somebody off ball, and in isolation. And last year, Julius's numbers in all three of those were awful. So pretty much everything on the perimeter, it's a combination of lack of effort, lack of technique, and you know, sometimes it is hard, even if you are locked in, for a 250-pound 6'9" guy to chase someone who's probably more nimble around the screen, or some smaller ball handler who's dancing out there, right, or stuff like that. But you gotta, like, if you're gonna be the four on a good team, that's part of your job, is to not give up, to not just concede that on the perimeter. So it can't be a mano type of thing. Like he can't just only get up for like, oh, it's me versus Paul George or something like that. Like you gotta,
you're the greats going at it.
you gotta do the boring stuff, man. Like if that's, I mean, this is not a new observation with Julius, right? This is something everybody has known about him for a long time. But just like we've seen him eclipse his potential on offense and go far beyond what people thought was possible, maybe he can do that on defense.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys watched Eastbound and Down, but I just watched it for the first time, and there's like a little bit of Kenny Powers there where you kind of assume the worst with him, and then like he'll like that chase down block, like he'll just surprise you. Because like I would frame him as like a quote unquote like selfish defender, and then he has moments where you're like, oh, that was unselfish. And same, and on offense, he clearly made more of an effort to like make early passes and make like, to your point, like I think it's literally the same thing on offense and defense, like him getting up for star matchups on defense and him in the past only passing when he would get an assist on offense, like kind of same mental mechanism there. And it felt like that got better offensively last year. So maybe there's some hope defensively. All right, guys, that's it for this episode with Prez. But if you enjoy him as much as we do, fear not. There'll be one more part of this 3-parter where we give Mitchell Robinson some love. First, Prez advocates for Jalen Brunson and Emmanuel Quickley, finding the bigs a little bit more on drives. And then, Alex, this is an old take for you, but it continues to be relevant, continues to be a good one. We've evolved past the point of asking Mitch for like a 3-pointer. We're kind of just like disappointed mothers at this point, saying like, all right, you're not going to do that. Can you at least, I don't know, like get to school on time? And for Mitch, that means one dribble moves, one dribble, dunk, jump hook, all that good stuff, getting seals, making his free throws. And then we finish up with some good stuff on Quentin Grimes, how he can elevate his game by advancing his ability to beat bad matchups and like bad defenders off the dribble. And Prez makes a pretty interesting analogy about how he could be used in an Evan Fournier type role on his first season as a Knick, and that'll really unlock his game. So that's pretty cool. I would tune in for that by itself. But we'll see you next time on Locked On Knicks for just that.